The thick, humid air of Hester's atmosphere clung to Ben Taylor's skin, the metallic scent of distant rain mixing with the fresh, earthy aroma of the massive Arboretum dome. This was no ordinary space station or sterile lab. This was a living environment, a vast ecological system contained within an enormous glass sphere. Beneath the artificial sunlight, alien plants thrived, their bioluminescent glow casting strange shadows against the polished metal floors. There was beauty here, but also an overwhelming sense of awe that Ben could never fully escape. Ben stood at the edge of the arboretum, watching as a Krath, one of the most fearsome alien species, discussed plant propagation techniques with an excitable group of Zoran who were some of the most peaceful species in the galaxy. He didn't understand half of what they were saying, half of the language was body movements, half was an almost impossible to comprehend tonal dialect. But what caught his attention wasn't the conversation or the towering alien trees around him. It was a small, seemingly unimportant thing, Eucalyptus globulus, a tree from Earth. He recognized it immediately. Ben had spent enough of his childhood in the woods to know that bark had a way of sticking to your memory. His grandfather used to take him on long hiking trips, where they'd collect twigs, strips of bark, and even leaves for fun, never to eat, just to pass the time. That thick, sharp, almost minty smell of the eucalyptus bark had become a small piece of home for him. The instructor's voice droned on in the background, but Ben's attention was fixed on the tree, its smooth, silver bark calling to him. He stepped toward it slowly, curiosity peaking in his mind. The plaque at the base of the tree confirmed its origin, Eucalyptus globulus, Earth origin, imported under license 47.3b. Ben chuckled to himself. He hadn't thought about the eucalyptus in years, not since he was a kid. His grandfather had once told him that chewing the cambium layer of a eucalyptus tree could clear your sinuses. With a quiet, almost impulsive decision, Ben bent down and peeled a narrow strip from the tree. The bark came off easily, revealing the pale, fibrous layer underneath. He sniffed it, that familiar sharp, minty aroma wafting into his senses. Without thinking twice, he popped the bark into his mouth, savoring the nostalgia of it, the cool, clean taste and the texture that reminded him of old memories from his Earth days. But as soon as his teeth sunk into the bark, a loud, shrill screech echoed across the dome, followed by a cacophony of high-pitched and guttural sounds that made Ben's stomach drop. It wasn't the bark, it was the reaction from the others. His mouth went dry. He swallowed hard, trying to make sense of what was happening. The air around him seemed to thrum with tension. A Lithian student, her fronds flaring outward in a panic response, pointed directly at him. "He's ingesting an elder," she shrieked. Her voice was filled with horror, and her words sent a shockwave through the assembled crowd. The Zoran next to her gasped, stepping back in horror. "An elder, you can't eat that." Ben blinked, confused. The whole scene was uncomfortably familiar, like a classroom suddenly spiraling out of control. "It's just tree bark," he muttered under his breath, attempting to explain. "I wasn't eating it, it's like gum." The confusion only deepened as another Gavaltian, one of the towering, clawed species with their 6 glowing eyes, pointed an accusatory finger. "It's alive," he barked, his voice shaking. "You're digesting a living entity." Ben froze, his face falling. "It's a tree, it's not alive, it's just a gum tree from Earth." He raised his hands, holding up the strip of bark, trying to explain, but the reactions grew even more intense. A Girian, an elderly alien with shimmering blue skin and far too many elbows, turned sharply and shouted, "Cease ingestion immediately, step away from the specimen." The Academy security drones began hovering around him, their mechanical voices eerily calm as they issued commands in alien tongues. But Ben couldn't move. His pulse quickened and the tiny piece of bark in his mouth suddenly felt much heavier than before. He swallowed hard again, hoping that somehow this wasn't as bad as it seemed. The last thing he wanted was to cause a galactic incident over something so trivial. The confusion continued, spiraling out of control. The Zoran instructor stood frozen, eyes wide, unable to comprehend what was happening. The Krath warrior, one of the most intimidating species in the Academy, took a deep breath and clenched his fists. "We cannot allow this desecration," he growled, his voice full of barely contained anger. But it wasn't just the species that were reacting, it was the entire Academy's fragile peace that seemed to shudder. The peaceful, carefully cultivated environment of the Peacekeeper Academy, meant to be a symbol of interspecies collaboration, was starting to crumble beneath the weight of one human, simple, nostalgic mistake. Ben's stomach sank as the security forces moved in, their weapons drawn, preparing to apprehend him. The calm that had defined the Peacekeeper Academy for so long was suddenly shattered by this strange act, and Ben realized too late that his impulsive action had set into motion something much larger than he could ever have anticipated. Just then a voice cut through the chaos, a voice Ben knew all too well. "Ben." It was Jay Lara, a member of the Hester species, a being known for their peace-focused culture and natural empathy. She rushed forward, her glowing blue skin reflecting the dome's ambient light as she stood between Ben and the Academy enforcers. Her eyes, full of calm determination, met Ben's. Stop, she commanded, her voice soft yet firm. He didn't mean harm. But it was too late. The moment the words left her mouth, the atmosphere in the dome shifted again. The Xenar, a high-ranking member of the Academy's council and the main antagonist to Ben's very existence in this place, turned toward them, a sneer twisting his reptilian features. It doesn't matter whether he meant harm or not, Xenar said, his voice dripping with disdain. What matters is that he's violated sacred customs. The consequences will be severe. And with that, Ben knew this was only the beginning. What he thought was an innocent act of curiosity had set into motion something far darker. He was no longer just an outsider, he was now a symbol of everything that humanity was feared to be. The Academy was about to find out just how far one human was willing to go to prove that peace wasn't just a matter of culture, it was a matter of the heart. But as Ben locked eyes with Lara, he realized that in this moment, more than ever, trust between species was about to be tested. And it all started with a simple act of curiosity. Ben's heart hammered in his chest as the scene around him spiraled further into chaos. He stood frozen, the strange aromatic bark still clinging to his tongue, but now it felt like the last thing he would ever taste. Alien voices, each one incomprehensible and fraught with fear, filled the air. Some of the species recoiled, their bodies tensed, fronds or tentacles unfurling in a gesture that spoke of alarm. The Academy enforcers, clad in sleek, reflective environmental suits, advanced on him, their footsteps muted by the dome's lush foliage. The tall, imposing figure of Xenar, the Krath, stepped forward, his claws clicking against the stone path. Ben could feel the weight of his stare as if the alien was looking straight through him. It was like being caught in the middle of a storm, everything was happening so fast, yet Ben could only move in slow motion, his mind racing. Lara was beside him now, her glowing blue skin contrasting sharply with the green of the trees. Ben, she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet urgency, you didn't know, but now we need to make them understand. I didn't do anything wrong, Ben muttered, still trying to wrap his mind around the chaos he'd caused. I just chewed some tree bark, it's not even that serious. Lara looked back at the approaching enforcers, her brow furrowed in thought. The tension in the air was palpable, and every alien in the vicinity seemed to be watching Ben's every move, waiting for something, a sign, an excuse, a reason to escalate the situation. Xenar's deep voice rumbled in the distance. You think this is just some innocent mistake, Earthborn? You've desecrated one of our most sacred trees. The arorial elder is a species of profound cultural and spiritual importance to the Lithians. They view the bark as holding the memories of their ancestors, and you chewed it. Ben swallowed hard. He had no idea what that meant. He thought of the eucalyptus bark like chewing gum, something nostalgic, a memory of home. But here it was something far greater, something the aliens revered as a living memory. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he realized just how wrong he had been. I didn't know, Ben said, his voice thick with regret. I'm not from here, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disrespect anyone or anything. But Xenar was not interested in apologies. Your ignorance is no excuse, he snapped. You've caused a cultural incident, and now we must report this to the Galactic Council. Your actions will have consequences, Earthborn. Ben's head swam with the weight of Xenar's words. This wasn't just an Academy issue anymore. This was a galactic incident. Enough, Lara's voice cut through the tension, and she stepped forward, placing herself firmly between Ben and the enforcers. Her deep blue eyes, usually calm and composed, now gleamed with determination. You cannot condemn him based on ignorance alone. Xenar sneered at her, his voice a low growl. And who are you to challenge the Council's authority, Heshtarian? Your people are known for their compassion, but this is not about compassion. This is about order. The enforcers, still hovering around, seemed hesitant, but their commanders made no move to intervene. The Academy had strict rules about cultural respect, one violation, and it could lead to dire consequences both for the individual and their species. Ben's heart sank as he realized that his presence, his mere existence among these highly evolved beings, had just become a liability. Lara's gaze softened as she turned to Ben. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. I can help you, but you have to trust me, she whispered urgently. I know it wasn't intentional, but the Academy is bound by tradition. If we don't act quickly, you'll be labeled as a threat to peace itself. Ben's mind raced. His head was still spinning from the shock of it all, but Lara's words cut through the confusion like a sharp knife. This was bigger than just a simple mistake. This was about something far more serious, galactic peace, traditions that spanned millennia, and the fragile alliances that held the universe together. You can't just throw me out, Ben said, his voice shaking. I've worked too hard to get here. I didn't come all this way just to ruin it over a piece of bark. Lara met his gaze, her eyes full of understanding. You're right, but the Academy doesn't see it that way. They're scared. They think your people could undermine everything they've built. The enforcers continued to circle, waiting for orders, their silence a heavy weight hanging over Ben. But just as the situation seemed to be at its breaking point, Professor Char, a respected figure at the Academy, suddenly appeared from behind a column of trees. His watery, translucent form shimmered with the light as he stepped forward, his voice steady yet tinged with concern. "Stop this," Professor Char commanded, his voice carrying authority. "Zenar, I will speak with the council. Ben's actions were misguided, but there's no need for this escalation. Let us settle this with reason, not with force." Zenar, clearly unwilling to back down, sneered but nodded. "This is your mess, Char, clean it up." With a heavy sigh, Jailara stepped back, her hand resting lightly on Ben's shoulder. "We're not done yet," she said quietly, "but for now we have a small victory." Ben nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but if he had any chance of surviving this, it would be because of Jailara's intervention. Without her, he might already have been expelled or worse. The following days were a blur of meetings, bureaucratic processes, and subtle alien glares. Ben was no longer just a student at the Peacekeeper Academy, he was a symbol of something much bigger. His innocent mistake, chewing the bark from a tree marked as Eucalyptus globulus, had become an intergalactic incident, shaking the very foundation of the Academy's ideals. After the incident in the Arboretum, Ben had been confined to his dorm room under a strict quarantine order. He wasn't allowed to leave until the Galactic Council had reviewed the incident. Professor Char had managed to delay any formal action, citing Ben's good intentions, but it was clear that things were spiraling out of control. The Academy's High Council was now investigating the implications of his actions, and Ben knew that his future here, if not his entire life, was hanging by a thread. Jailara, ever the ally, visited him in his room every day. The soft hum of the Academy's artificial gravity system was the only sound as she sat across from him, her ethereal blue skin almost glowing in the low light. "Ben," she said, her voice calm but filled with an underlying urgency, "we need to be strategic. The council is divided. Some will side with Zenar, while others might still see reason. But you have to understand that your actions have resonated beyond just this academy. It's not just about one mistake, it's about humanity's place in the galaxy." Ben rubbed his eyes, exhausted from days of packing back and forth, trying to wrap his mind around the political chaos his simple curiosity had sparked. "I didn't mean to cause this. I thought it was just a gum tree, a piece of earth. What's the big deal?" Jailara sighed softly, her eyes filled with empathy. "The big deal is that the Lithians believe the bark is a vessel of ancestral wisdom. Consuming it is seen as desecration. In their culture, the tree is a living record. For some species, the very act of eating it is akin to erasing their history." Ben shook his head, disbelieving. "I didn't know that. I didn't even think." "I know," she said, gently interrupting him, "but that's why we're here. I'm doing everything I can to get them to understand, but there are forces within the Academy that don't want you here. They don't want humanity in this peacekeeping program." Her words hit Ben harder than he expected. He had thought the Peacekeeper Academy was supposed to be a place where peace, diplomacy, and mutual understanding were upheld, yet it was quickly becoming clear that it was a place of deep divisions and prejudices, not just between species, but within the very institution that was supposed to promote unity. The next morning, Ben was summoned to the council chamber. His heart raced as he entered the massive room, filled with towering statues and holographic projections of various species' homeworlds. The walls were lined with alien artifacts, each one symbolizing the ideals of peace that the Academy was built upon. Yet, as Ben stepped into the room, he felt nothing but the weight of suspicion bearing down on him. Zenar was already there, standing at the head of the council table, his reptilian eyes glowing with disdain as he looked at Ben. A few seats away, Dean Gillette, a dignified Gavalshan, sat with her glowing carapace pulsing softly in the light. At the far end of the table sat Professor Char, his watery form shimmering with faint concern, as though he had been caught in a tempest. And then beside him was Jailara, whose presence was calm, yet radiated a quiet strength as she stood in solidarity with Ben. "Ben Taylor," the voice of Zenar rang out, harsh and condescending. "You stand before us today accused of violating the sanctity of interspecies customs. You consumed a sacred species, one that has been part of the Lithian heritage for millennia. This act is more than just ignorance, it is a direct affront to our way of life." Ben clenched his fists, trying to remain composed. The council's chamber felt cold, distant, and utterly alien to him. His instincts screamed that there was something deeply wrong with how they were treating this situation. "I didn't mean to offend anyone," Ben began, his voice steady but carrying the weight of his frustration. "It was a mistake, and I've apologized. I've tried to explain." "You don't understand," snapped Zenar, cutting him off. "This isn't just about one species or one mistake. Your people have a history, one of violence, of conflict. You come here to a place that symbolizes peace, and you disrupt it with your ignorance. The galaxy doesn't trust you, Earthborn." The words hit Ben harder than a blow to the chest. The weight of every alien eye in the room was on him now. He wasn't just being judged for a mistake. He was being judged for all of humanity, for every scar humanity had left on the galaxy. "You can't just hold me responsible for my species' past," Ben shot back, his voice growing louder. "I'm here to make things right. I'm not my ancestors. I didn't start any wars. I came here to learn to make peace." Laura's hand touched his arm gently, a silent reminder to calm down. Ben, she said softly, this isn't about you alone, but it is about humanity's place in this galaxy. You have the potential to change their minds if you show them that you understand their fears, their history, and their culture. Ben glanced at Laura, feeling the weight of her words. The Academy was a battleground now, not for weapons, but for perception. If he wanted a future here, he would have to prove that humanity could offer something more than conflict. Dean Gillat, the Gavaltian, shifted in her seat, her carapace pulsing with a soft blue light as she spoke. We have listened to the Council's arguments. Xenar, your claims are valid in their own right, but they are not the only truth. Humanity's presence here is necessary for the future of galactic peace. We cannot allow one mistake to undermine their place in this program. Xenar snarled, clearly displeased, but he didn't argue. The Gavaltian's word carried weight. The question now, Dean Gillette continued, is how we move forward. What consequences should be imposed, and how can we ensure that no further incidents occur? Ben looked at Lara, who nodded slightly in encouragement. He knew this was his moment. If he didn't find a way to prove himself, he could be expelled from the Academy. Worse, humanity's standing in the galaxy might suffer irreparably. I'm willing to make amends, Ben said, his voice steady. I'll do whatever it takes, but I need a chance to show you what humans can offer, to show you that we can be part of the peace we all strive for. I didn't come here to destroy anything, I came here to build. The room fell silent. For a moment Ben's words hung in the air, the weight of his sincerity pressing down on them all. Xenar's eyes narrowed as he sneered, but he said nothing. The council's debate continued, but Ben knew that he had planted the seed of doubt. He had forced them to consider humanity's potential. Now all he could do was wait for their decision. The days that followed were a tense waiting game. Ben found himself locked in the uncertainty of his own future, packing the confines of his dorm room as the galaxy's most powerful peacekeepers debated his fate. He had tried to maintain a calm demeanor, but inside his nerves were frayed. Every glance from the alien students who passed by his room carried a judgment that weighed on him. The whispers, the sideways glances, the accusing stares, they were all there, like an invisible force closing in on him from all sides. Lara continued to visit, but even her usual calm seemed to be cracking. She was doing her best to help him navigate the Academy's complex politics, but Ben could see the strain in her eyes, too. There was more than just his future at stake. There was the future of interspecies cooperation, the future of diplomacy in the galaxy. And perhaps more than either of them realized, their actions could change the very nature of the Peacekeeper Academy itself. One evening, after a long and silent dinner in his room, Lara arrived unexpectedly, her usual calm demeanor replaced by urgency. She was holding something in her hands, an ancient-looking data pad, its interface glowing with a soft, iridescent light. We don't have much time, Lara said, her voice low and tense. Ben, I've been digging into the Academy's records, trying to understand why this is escalating the way it has. I found something troubling. Ben raised an eyebrow. What did you find? Lara glanced over her shoulder to ensure no one was listening, then leaned in closer. The Academy's leadership, especially Xenar, is using your incident to rally support against humanity's involvement in the Peacekeeper program. They don't just want you out, they want to use this as a justification for removing all humans from this institution. Ben's stomach churned. That's insane, I'm just one guy. Lara shook her head. It's not about you as a person, Ben, it's about what you represent. Humanity is seen as a species that hasn't earned its place in the galaxy's peace efforts. Xenar is using this incident to fuel a much larger narrative, one that could jeopardize all humans' involvement in galactic diplomacy. Why? Ben asked, frustration creeping into his voice. Why would they want to keep us out? Lara hesitated for a moment, as though choosing her words carefully. Because despite everything the Academy stands for, many species still fear humanity. The Krath, the Varlock, the Korath, they see your violent history as proof that humans will never truly understand the peace they've fought for. Xenar is just the loudest voice in a crowd of many who believe this. Ben felt a lump in his throat. He had come here to prove humanity could change, that Earth could offer something valuable to the galaxy's peacekeepers. But what if all that he'd done so far had only made things worse? What if the very existence of humans here in this prestigious academy was a mistake? I didn't ask for this, Ben muttered, running a hand through his hair. All I wanted was to be a part of something bigger than myself. I didn't think it would cost me this much. Lara placed the data pad in front of him, her voice firm. This isn't just about you anymore, Ben. This is about all of humanity. If you want to stay, if you want to show them what Earth can really offer, you have to do something that proves we're not the monsters they think we are. Ben stared at the data pad, which displayed a long list of records, meeting notes, statements from the Council, and even Xenar's personal log entries. The evidence was clear. This wasn't just a simple cultural misunderstanding. It was an orchestrated campaign to prevent humanity from being a part of the galactic peacekeeping effort. We have to fight back, Ben said, his voice hardening with determination. If I don't do something now, humanity might never get a chance to prove itself. Jaylora nodded, but there was a shadow of doubt in her eyes. You're right, but the way you fight back matters. This isn't just about combat skills or physical strength. This is about changing their minds, showing them we're not the violent species they think we are. Ben was silent for a moment, the weight of the situation settling into his chest. How could one human possibly change the galaxy's view of his entire species? Tell me what I need to do, he said, his voice steady now. He was done waiting, done being a passive observer. If he was going to earn his place in this academy, if humanity was going to have a future in the galaxy, he would have to take matters into his own hands. Jaylara's eyes brightened, her expression filled with quiet resolve. The next trial is tomorrow. It's a team-building exercise, a test of diplomacy, intellect, and cooperation. You'll need to prove that you can work with others despite your differences. The stakes are higher than ever. If you fail, humanity's future here might be sealed. The team diplomacy trial was one of the Academy's most rigorous challenges. It wasn't just about knowledge or strength, it was about understanding, compromise, and unity. The teams were selected randomly, and participants had no choice but to work together no matter their species or background. For Ben, this was a challenge unlike any he had faced before. As he stood before the large Hesterian simulation chamber, the artificial sky above him flickering with holographic stars, he felt the weight of what was about to happen. The chamber was designed to simulate intergalactic conflict scenarios, and the participants were to resolve a mock diplomatic crisis that could either unite or divide the galaxy. Ben's heart raced. He wasn't just fighting for himself now, he was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. The Academy had always been a symbol of peace, but Ben had come to realize that peace wasn't just about stopping wars. It was about overcoming fear, overcoming the unknown, and proving that trust could exist between species. The doors to the chamber slid open and Ben stepped inside. His team members were already there, each one sizing him up. There was Lyra, a stern Varlock diplomat with silvery skin and a sharp, calculating gaze. Next to her was Korath, a hulking alien with a strange, rough texture to his skin, his eyes like dark pits. And finally there was Jaylora, who had already positioned herself beside Ben, offering him a reassuring nod. This was it, there was no turning back now. The simulated crisis was presented, a resource-rich planet on the brink of war, its inhabitants divided between two factions, one of which was desperate for peace and the other for control. Each team member was assigned a role in the negotiations, but the key to success was clear: the team had to find common ground. The team diplomacy trial was supposed to test the participants' ability to negotiate and find peaceful solutions to a simulated crisis. What Ben hadn't anticipated, however, was how quickly it would escalate into something far more personal. It wasn't just about diplomacy anymore, it was about survival. As Xenar entered the chamber, his presence loomed like a shadow over the proceedings. His reptilian eyes scanned the room, his body stiff with disdain. The tension in the chamber became palpable, and Ben felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Xenar's voice cut through the silence like a blade. This trial is a farce. Humanity has no place here, no place among us. Ben Taylor is an outsider, a symbol of everything that has caused conflict in this galaxy. His mere presence here undermines the ideals this academy was built upon. Ben's pulse quickened and his heart began to race. He had expected resistance, but not like this. Lyra, the Varlock diplomat, shot him a look, her eyes narrowing. Korath, the towering alien beside her, growled low in his throat, clearly agitated by Xenar's interruption. This is not about Ben, Jaylora said, her voice calm yet firm. This is about finding peace despite our differences. We've come here to solve a crisis, not to point fingers and assign blame. But Xenar wasn't interested in peace. His eyes were fixed on Ben, a burning hatred in them. Your species doesn't belong here, he snarled. You will never understand the delicate balance we have built. I refuse to allow one human to ruin the future of the galaxy. Ben's hands clenched into fists. His mind raced, but one thing was clear: he couldn't let Xenar's words define him. He couldn't let the Krath or anyone dictate humanity's future. The galaxy wasn't just Xenar's to control. Humanity had a place here, and he would fight for it. Enough, Ben said, his voice steady, but carrying a weight of authority that surprised even him. I'm not here to ruin anything. I'm here because I believe in peace. I believe in working together. You want to keep us out, fine, but I'll show you just how wrong you are. Xenar sneered, stepping forward. You think you can change anything Earthborn? You think your human ideals can undo centuries of tradition and order? You're nothing more than an outcast among us. Ben took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. This wasn't just a diplomatic test. This was a battle for respect for humanity's place in the galaxy. He had to prove that humans could be trusted. He had to prove that humanity wasn't just a species defined by violence, but by compassion, ingenuity, and the will to stand up for what was right. Let's finish this trial, Ben said, turning away from Xenar's gaze. He didn't need to waste time with him anymore. It was clear that Xenar wasn't going to play fair, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the trial and the message he needed to send. The simulated conflict escalated quickly. The planet's inhabitants, one faction desperate for peace and the other vying for control, fought over the same resources. Ben's team had to navigate complex political allegiances, cultural divides, and emotional baggage. It wasn't just about speaking the right words, it was about convincing people who had deep-seated fears and prejudices that there was a better way. Ben quickly took charge of the negotiations, his voice calm and measured as he spoke to each faction leader. The Varlock diplomat Lyra kept an eye on the other faction's movements, ensuring no one made a power grab. Korath, despite his aggression, played a crucial role in using his imposing presence to enforce a ceasefire between the two sides. The alien species who had long been at odds slowly began to listen. But as the trial progressed, Ben began to see just how deeply entrenched the factions' hatred for each other really was. Their distrust ran deep, and every attempt at peace seemed to fall apart the moment it began to take root. At that moment, Ben knew he had to do something drastic, something that would break the cycle of violence. "We're doing it all wrong," Ben said, his voice cutting through the heated discussion. Everyone turned to him, surprised by the sudden outburst. "We're treating this like a game of diplomacy. We're using words like weapons, trying to control, trying to dominate. That's why it's failing." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "What do you suggest then?" Ben took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "We've been focused on the wrong thing. This isn't about winning. It's not about taking sides. It's about showing them that there's another way, that they don't have to fight for survival. They can fight for something better. We can't just tell them peace is the answer. We have to show them why it's worth fighting for." The room fell into a heavy silence as everyone considered his words. It was true. Humanity had always been at odds with the rest of the galaxy, but in those moments of true conflict, when humanity fought for what was right, they had the power to inspire change. Jailara looked at Ben with a mixture of admiration and pride. "You're right," she said softly. "We don't need to just talk about peace, we need to embody it. We need to be the ones who show them that it's possible." As the team adjusted their approach, something unexpected happened. The factions who had once been so divided began to listen not just to Ben's words but to the sincerity in his actions. He wasn't trying to control them. He wasn't trying to impose humanity's ideals on them. He was simply offering them a choice to trust, to move beyond their fears, and to find common ground. But just as they were about to reach a breakthrough, Zenar returned, his anger boiling over. He had been watching the trial from the observation room, and now his patience had run out. "This is a farce," Zenar shouted, charging into the chamber, his claws flashing dangerously. "Humanity does not deserve a place in this academy. Your diplomacy is nothing but weakness. You will never be a part of the peace we've fought for." Before anyone could react, Zenar lunged at Ben, his claws slashing through the air. Ben barely had time to react, but his instincts kicked in. He ducked low, using his own human agility to avoid the strike, his heart pounding in his chest. "Get out of my way," Zenar roared, pushing his way through the group. He raised his arm to strike again, but Ben was faster this time. He grabbed a nearby metal rod used for the simulation equipment and swung it at Zenar, knocking the alien back with a sharp crack. The room erupted into chaos. Zenar's fury boiled over as he charged again, but this time the other members of Ben's team stepped in to protect him. Korath, Lyra, and Jailara surrounded Zenar, blocking his path and forcing him to reconsider his actions. Ben stood, his chest heaving as he caught his breath, his mind still racing. "Enough," he said, his voice steady and strong. "I'm done with this. You want to prove humanity doesn't belong here, fine, but this is about more than just one mistake. This is about what we can offer, what we can bring to the galaxy. You can't stop that, Zenar." The room fell into a stunned silence as Zenar stepped back, his claws retracting into his armored skin. He was breathing heavily, his eyes glowing with barely contained fury, but for the first time since the beginning of the trial, he hesitated. The other members of the team stood resolute, ready to protect Ben, but it wasn't just their actions that had halted Zenar. There was something else in the air, a shift, as though the very essence of what they had been fighting for had suddenly become clearer. Behind Zenar, a voice suddenly broke through the tension, calm and authoritative. It was Professor Char, his watery form shimmering as he stepped into the chamber, flanked by a few other council members. His presence was commanding, and despite the volatile atmosphere, he exuded an aura of reason. "Enough," Char said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "This trial is not about violence or confrontation. It is about the future of peace of all species, and that future requires us to look beyond our prejudices, beyond the shadows of our past." Zenar glared at Char, but the professor held his ground. "We've seen the best of what this academy can offer, but I have seen something more important today, the potential for humanity to contribute something none of us could have anticipated." Ben's heart raced as the professor's words echoed through the chamber. It felt as if the world had shifted beneath him. Was Char actually speaking in his favor? Ben had no idea, but in that moment, everything seemed to hang on the next few seconds. Zenar's anger flared again. "You are blind, Char. You would allow one simpleton to destroy everything we've worked for. You would risk galactic peace for one mistake." His voice was laced with venom, but there was something more beneath the surface fear. Fear that Ben's humanity, his heart, could truly change things. Char's voice didn't falter. Humanity has been misjudged for far too long. They are not here to destroy Xenar. They are here to prove that peace is possible, even for those with a violent past. I have seen that potential in Ben Taylor. The room remained quiet as the professor's words lingered. Ben felt his chest tighten. This was his moment to prove that humanity could be more than its history, that they could be something to help shape the future of the galaxy. But it was also a dangerous moment. The council would decide whether or not Ben would be allowed to continue in the academy, and even more, whether humanity could remain a part of the peace effort. Professor Char Dean Gillette, a towering Gavaltian council member, spoke up, her voice reverberating with authority. We must acknowledge the importance of this incident. Ben Taylor has caused unrest. His actions could have led to irreparable damage between species. We must consider the consequences carefully. Ben stood taller, steeling himself for whatever was to come. He had made his stand. He had proven his willingness to change, to build something that would unite, not divide. Xenar's eyes flashed with malice. You think this is over? You think that by showing a little humility, you've earned your place here? The galaxy does not forgive mistakes like this. At those words, something inside Ben clicked. He didn't care about the accusations anymore, the judgments, or the prejudice. Humanity had a chance to show that they could be more than what others believed. He didn't need to prove himself to Xenar. He needed to prove himself to the galaxy. He needed to show that, even in the face of fear, humanity could stand firm, could inspire change. This isn't about forgiveness, Xenar, Ben said, his voice firm. It's about what we can become despite our mistakes. We can't change the past, but we can shape the future. That's what peace is. It's not just stopping the war, it's about creating something that lasts. There was a long pause. Everyone was watching, waiting. The tension was unbearable, each breath a slow inhale, a suspended moment of uncertainty. The decision came swiftly, the room growing silent as the council members deliberated. Ben felt as if every ounce of his strength was being drained from him. This was it, the final judgment. Char, who had long supported the peace efforts, finally spoke. We have been too divided for too long. Humanity has the potential to show us what we have missed, the power of compassion in a galaxy filled with chaos. But humanity must understand the gravity of their actions. Ben Taylor must prove that this path is one that can truly unite us all. Dean Gillette's voice cut through the silence, her tone heavy but decisive. The council has come to a conclusion. Ben Taylor, you will be allowed to remain in the academy, but under probationary terms. We will closely monitor your progress, and you will be required to complete a series of cultural education missions designed to test your ability to navigate interspecies conflicts. This is your last chance. Fail, and you will be expelled. Ben's breath hitched as the weight of the council's decision settled over him. He had been given a chance to prove that humanity could belong here, that they could be more than their past. But it wasn't a free pass, it was a burden. Every move Ben made from now on would be scrutinized. His every decision would carry the weight of humanity's future. As the council members filed out of the chamber, Xenar shot Ben one last venomous look. You may have won this round, Earthborn, he said, his voice low and filled with hatred, but you are nothing in the eyes of the galaxy. Ben's fists clenched, but he didn't respond. He didn't need to, the battle had just begun. He had a chance to prove himself not just to Xenar, but to every species that doubted humanity's place in the galaxy. Jaelara stepped forward, her face softer now, though her eyes still held the gravity of the situation. You've done it, Ben, she said, her voice quiet but full of hope. You've earned a chance, but it's up to you to prove that you're worth it, that humanity is worth it. Ben nodded, his jaw tight. I won't fail, not now, not ever. But deep down, he knew the true test was just beginning. The real challenge wasn't in the trials he would face in the academy. It was in the hearts and minds of the species that watched him. He had to show them that peace wasn't just something to talk about, it was something to fight for. And if that meant sacrificing everything to make it happen, then that was a price Ben was willing to pay. The message on Ben's datapad was like a cold fist to the chest. He had just fought his way through one battle, his future at the Peacekeeper Academy was secured, but only just. Now the Galactic Council was calling him for a personal meeting. The implications were clear, they weren't done evaluating him yet. This wasn't about diplomacy or protocol anymore. This was about humanity's future on a galactic scale. Jaelara had left shortly after the council's decision, leaving Ben to stew in his thoughts. His room had never felt smaller, the air never more oppressive. He sat by his desk, his fingers tapping nervously against the surface as he stared at the encrypted message. Every worst-case scenario flashed through his mind. What if they were reconsidering the probationary terms? What if, despite everything he had fought for, the council was prepared to cut him and humanity loose? He couldn't let that happen, he wouldn't. The Galactic Council's meeting room was far more imposing than Ben had imagined. It was located on the upper levels of the Academy, a place reserved for the highest echelons of power. The room itself was a stark contrast to the Academy's organic designs, sleek, cold, and metallic, with holographic displays projecting the various species' homeworlds across the walls. Ben stood at the center of the room, his hands clenched at his sides. A large hologram of the galaxy rotated slowly above him, its swirling mass of stars and planets a reminder of just how vast the universe was. He felt small, insignificant in the face of it all, yet his heart raced with determination. He had come here to prove humanity could stand among the stars, and he wouldn't back down now. The council members entered the room one by one. Dean Gillette was the first to arrive, followed by Xenar, who entered with a look of deep disapproval etched on his reptilian face. The Hesterian representative, a being with soft, flowing limbs that looked like liquid glass, glided into the room next. Professor Char followed last, his translucent body glowing faintly with a calm light. Once they were seated, Ben was directed to take his place at the center of the room. His legs felt heavy as he walked toward the chair facing the council. Ben Taylor, Dean Gillette began, her voice steady and measured. We've reviewed your performance in the Academy, your actions during the diplomacy trial, and your personal conduct since the incident in the Arboretum. We have come to a conclusion. Xenar, seated across from Ben, couldn't hide his scorn. Your actions have caused more damage than you can understand. Humanity's presence here will always be questioned, and your continued participation undermines the peace we've fought for. Ben's chest tightened at the words, but he stood tall, refusing to let Xenar's venom get the best of him. I'm not here to undermine anything. I'm here to learn to build something better, something real. Dean Gillette raised a hand, signaling for Xenar to remain silent. The Council has taken into account the consequences of your actions, but also the potential humanity brings to this institution. Your future in the Peacekeeper Academy and humanity's future in the galaxy depends on how you proceed from here. Ben's heart pounded. This was it, the moment of truth. You have been placed on a probationary period, Ben Taylor, Gillette continued, her voice echoing in the room. But this is not a punishment. It is an opportunity, a chance for you to prove that humanity can belong in this galaxy. You will undergo additional trials that test not only your ability to navigate interspecies conflicts, but also your ability to demonstrate the values of peace, compassion, and cooperation. Your actions in the next few weeks will determine whether you remain at the Academy, and whether humanity will have a place in the future of galactic peace. Ben's breath caught in his throat. He had expected some form of punishment, perhaps an expulsion or a permanent ban, but this was different. This was an opportunity. His heart swelled with hope, but the weight of responsibility settled in. The stakes had just been raised higher than ever before. You will be working closely with J. Lara and Professor Char on several missions designed to test your diplomatic abilities. Your first assignment will take place in the coming days, Dean Gillette said. If you succeed, humanity's place in this academy and the galaxy will be solidified. Xenar leaned forward, his voice dripping with malice. Do not mistake this for mercy. You are being given a chance, but your failure will have consequences far beyond just your own. If you fail, humanity will not be allowed to participate in galactic peace efforts, ever. Ben met Xenar's gaze, his own eyes steely with resolve. I won't fail. There was a moment of silence, and then Professor Char spoke, his calm, measured tone breaking through the tension. I believe in you, Ben. Humanity's future and your future here are in your hands. This is a trial not just of skill, but of character. Ben nodded. I understand. I'm ready. The meeting ended with little fanfare. The council members filed out, leaving Ben alone in the room with J. Lara and Professor Char. The silence was heavy as Ben let out a long breath, finally allowing himself a moment to process everything. Are you okay? J. Lara asked softly, her eyes filled with concern. Ben nodded, his heart still racing. I am now. I can't let this slip away. Humanity can't afford to slip away. Char smiled at him, his shimmering form glowing faintly. This is only the beginning, Ben. What happens next is up to you. We have faith in you. As Ben left the council chamber, a sense of quiet determination settled over him. He had been given a chance not just for himself, but for humanity. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. He would face skepticism, prejudice, and perhaps even betrayal from within the academy. But he knew one thing for sure: this was his fight, and he would fight for humanity's future in the galaxy. He wasn't just here to learn peace, he was here to make it happen. The final test had just begun.